What if I told you that the most powerful person in the NFL made a secret phone call that completely changed one player's career forever? What if I told you that this call exposed a conspiracy so deep, it could destroy the league's reputation entirely? And what if I told you the player at the center of it all was supposed to be the #1 draft pick, but instead fell 142 spots because of something that had nothing to do with football? This is the story of Shedeur Sanders, the story they don't want you to know, the story that reveals the ugly truth about power, politics, and systematic targeting in America's most popular sport. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the NFL's dark side operates, why the commissioner himself had to intervene, and how one phone call saved a career while exposing the league's biggest conspiracy in decades. But first, let me show you just how impossible Shedeur's fall really was. Picture this. A quarterback throws for 4,134 yards and 37 touchdowns with a 74% completion rate. He breaks records, dominates college football, and every expert projects him as a top 3 pick destined for NFL stardom. Then draft day arrives, and something unprecedented happens. 142 players get selected before his name is called. 142. Players who couldn't hold his jockstrap in college somehow get picked ahead of him. This wasn't just a draft slide. This was a statistical impossibility that defied every metric, every projection, and every ounce of football logic. The quarterback was Shedeur Sanders, and his fall from grace became the most controversial moment in NFL draft history. But what happened next would expose a conspiracy so damning, it forced the league's most powerful executives into panic mode. Because while Shedeur sat in that green room, watching his dreams crumble with each passing pick, phone calls were being made at the highest levels of the NFL. Desperate phone calls. Emergency phone calls. Phone calls that would ultimately save his career, but expose the league's darkest secrets in the process. But before we dive into those explosive phone calls, you need to understand just how orchestrated this whole thing really was. August 18th, 2025. The Cleveland Browns organization was in complete chaos. They had just announced Joe Flacco as their Week 1 starter over Shedeur Sanders, and the football world was losing its collective mind. But what happened next would make headlines for all the wrong reasons. According to multiple sources close to the situation, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell placed a direct call to Browns owner Jimmy Haslam. The conversation was brief but explosive. Goodell reportedly told Haslam that Sanders needed to play, and the owner's response left everyone in the room speechless. But this wasn't just about one player or one team. This phone call was damage control for a conspiracy that had been brewing since draft day. You see, what the public didn't know was that the NFL had been dealing with the fallout from Shedeur's draft slide for months. Social media was erupting. Discrimination lawsuits were being filed, and the league's image was taking a massive hit. The call to Haslam wasn't just a suggestion, it was an order. The commissioner of the National Football League was personally intervening to fix a situation that threatened to destroy the sport's credibility. But how did we get here? How did a player with first-round talent fall so far that it required direct intervention from the league office? The answer takes us back to draft day, where a conspiracy unlike anything we've ever seen was allegedly unfolding behind closed doors. Draft Day 2025 will forever be remembered as the day the NFL's mask slipped completely off. As pick after pick was announced without Shedeur Sanders' name, social media began to explode with accusations, theories, and outrage that would make Watergate investigators take notes. The conspiracy theory started with a bombshell claim from Antonio Brown. On August 1st, 2025, Brown alleged that NFL owners had a secret agreement, a gentleman's pact, not to draft Shedeur Sanders. According to Brown, 31 teams had agreed to blackball Sanders, and only Jimmy Haslam broke ranks by selecting him under pressure from league headquarters. But Antonio Brown wasn't the only one talking. Boomer Esiason, a respected former NFL quarterback, dropped his own bombshell on WFN radio. He claimed that personnel from 3 different teams told him their owners gave them direct orders. Take Sanders off your draft board. I don't want that guy. Think about what this means. We're not talking about teams individually deciding to pass on a player. We're talking about coordinated, systematic exclusion. We're talking about owners allegedly communicating with each other to ensure one specific player wouldn't get drafted. If true, this would represent the most massive violation of antitrust laws in sports history. This would be collusion on a scale that would make the Colin Kaepernick situation look like a minor disagreement. This would expose the NFL as a rigged system where talent takes a backseat to politics and personal vendettas. But the conspiracy goes even deeper than you think. Stephen A. Smith wasn't mincing words when he connected the dots that everyone else was afraid to touch. He compared Shedeur's treatment to Colin Kaepernick's blackballing, and he said something that sent shockwaves through the sports media landscape. This feels like Kaepernick-level collusion. But Stephen A. wasn't just making hot takes for television ratings. His analysis was backed by the statistical impossibility of Sanders' fall and the league's desperate need for quarterback talent across multiple franchises. When a player with Sanders' college production falls to the 5th round, it's either systematic bias or the worst collective evaluation in NFL history. The racial component became impossible to ignore when a Colorado Buffaloes fan filed a $100 million lawsuit in May 2025, alleging that racial discrimination contributed to Sanders' slide. The lawsuit cited leaked statements about Sanders' attitude as slanderous and claimed they violated the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Even more explosive was the reference to a mysterious 61-page arbitration report that allegedly found evidence of collusion against black quarterbacks. While the details of this document remain sealed, the plaintiff's legal team indicated they possessed evidence of coordinated communication between ownership groups. Here's what made this particularly damning. Eli Manning faced no consequences for essentially forcing his way out of San Diego in 2004. Yet Sanders was allegedly penalized for his father's similar advocacy. The comparison highlighted potential racial double standards in how quarterback demands were perceived. White quarterbacks received preferential treatment for identical behavior that was deemed unacceptable when exhibited by black prospects. But was it really about race, or was there something else driving this unprecedented fall? While conspiracy theories captured headlines, the uncomfortable truth was that Shedeur Sanders had given NFL teams plenty of legitimate reasons to question his character and readiness for professional football. And some of these reasons were impossible to ignore. The red flag started during the pre-draft process when Sanders refused to throw at the NFL scouting combine. While other elite prospects were proving themselves under standardized conditions, Sanders limited his workouts to Colorado's Pro Day. Teams interpreted this as arrogance, a sign that Sanders believed he was above the normal evaluation process. But the combine snub was just the beginning. Anonymous reports from multiple teams described Sanders as cocky, entitled, and unprepared during interviews. One particularly damaging story involved Sanders allegedly responding to criticism of his game film by telling a team, "Maybe I'm not the guy for you," rather than addressing their concerns. Even worse, Sanders allegedly failed to catch mistakes that teams intentionally planted in their defensive installations during interviews, a standard test to evaluate a quarterback's football IQ and preparation habits. When coaches called out his failures during these sessions, Sanders reportedly didn't take the criticism well, further reinforcing concerns about his maturity and coachability. The baggage extended beyond Sanders himself. Teams weren't just drafting Shedeur, they were drafting the entire Sanders family circus, complete with media attention, social media drama, and the ever-present specter of paternal interference from day on. The concern wasn't just about coaching Sanders, it was about whether they'd have to constantly deal with family involvement and second-guessing. And then there were the speeding tickets. Sanders received 2 citations in early 2025 for driving 91 miles per hour in a 65 zone and 101 miles per hour in a 60 zone. While these might seem minor, they reinforced perceptions of immaturity and poor decision-making that teams had already formed during the interview process. But even with legitimate concerns, was Sanders' fall really justified? Or was something more sinister at play? When the Cleveland Browns finally selected Shedeur Sanders with the 144th pick, it wasn't because they wanted him. According to multiple sources, it was because they had to. The Browns had already selected Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, just 50 picks earlier. Gabriel was projected as a 5th to 7th round pick, yet somehow landed ahead of a player many considered first-round material. The Browns now had 5 quarterbacks on their roster: Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dillon Gabriel, Deshaun Watson, and Sanders. It was organizational chaos disguised as depth, and everyone knew it. Owner Jimmy Haslam's public comments revealed just how reluctant the organization was about the Sanders pick. "If you'd have told me Friday night we were going to pick Shedeur, I would have said that's not happening," Haslam admitted. while attributing the decision entirely to G.M. Andrew Barry. This wasn't just throwing your general manager under the bus. This was backing the bus up and running him over again for good measure. But Haslam's comments revealed something even more damaging about the league's internal dynamics. The Browns had not one, but 2 meetings on draft day specifically about Sanders. 2 meetings. Think about that. Owners don't hold multiple emergency meetings about 5th-round prospects unless there's external pressure involved. That pressure, according to sources, came directly from Park Avenue, NFL headquarters, where league executives were watching their public relations nightmare unfold in real time with each passing round that Sanders remained unselected. The alleged commissioner involvement wasn't just about Sanders as an individual. It was about protecting the league's image during a draft that was becoming a disaster. Every round, Sanders went unselected, added fuel to the conspiracy theories, discrimination claims, and social media outrage that threatened to overshadow the entire event. But selecting Sanders was just the beginning of Cleveland's problems. Once Sanders arrived in Cleveland, his treatment seemed designed more to justify the organization's reluctance than develop their investment. Reports emerged that Sanders was receiving limited first-team reps and was allegedly throwing to equipment staff during practice sessions. The most telling incident came when Sanders suffered an oblique injury that sidelined him after his impressive preseason debut. The timing was convenient for an organization that seemed uncomfortable with their 5th-round pick's sudden popularity. Sanders had completed 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns against Carolina, earning praise from LeBron James and proving his talent was undeniable. But instead of building on that success, Sanders found himself quickly relegated back to the shadows where the organization apparently preferred him. His request for Deion to stay away from practice. "Dad, I may get 3-4 reps in practice. I don't want you seeing that," revealed both his desire for independence and his frustration with his limited opportunities. The situation reached peak controversy when Sanders confronted Cleveland reporter Tony Grossi after his preseason debut, asking, "What did I do to you?" regarding Grossi's consistently negative coverage. While some praised Sanders' confidence, others saw it as evidence of the immaturity that supposedly caused his draft slide. The fact that the exchange was filmed by his brother's media company and immediately posted online reinforced concerns about the Sanders family's media-first mentality and their willingness to create controversy for content creation purposes. Everything about Sanders' treatment in Cleveland seemed to validate the conspiracy theories, while simultaneously providing cover for the organization's obvious reluctance to develop him properly. So what's the real story? Was Shedeur Sanders the victim of the most elaborate conspiracy in NFL history? Or did his own actions provide teams with legitimate reasons to pass on him despite his obvious talent? The truth, as it often does, lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. Sanders absolutely gave teams legitimate reasons to question his character, preparation, and readiness for professional football. His interview performances were reportedly poor. His attitude came across as entitled, and his family dynamics created organizational concerns that most franchises prefer to avoid. But here's what can't be ignored. The statistical impossibility of his fall, the coordinated messaging from multiple teams, and the unprecedented intervention from the league office all point to something more systematic than individual team evaluations. Whether you call it conspiracy, collusion, or just really bad collective decision-making, the end result was the same. A player with first-round talent fell to the 5th round, creating a public relations nightmare that required damage control from the highest levels of the NFL. The phone call from Commissioner Goodell to Jimmy Haslam wasn't just about one player. It was about protecting a league that was facing accusations of systematic bias, discrimination lawsuits, and a social media firestorm that threatened to expose the ugly realities of how power and politics operate in professional sports. Sanders became a political football in the worst possible way. Talented enough to deserve better treatment, controversial enough to create legitimate concerns, and connected enough to force the league into action when the situation spiraled out of control. The Shedeur Sanders saga represents something much larger than one player's draft experience. It's a perfect storm that exposed the uncomfortable intersection of talent evaluation, racial bias, family dynamics, media attention, and league politics in modern professional football. Sanders' fall revealed how quickly talent can become secondary to perception, how family connections can become liabilities, and how the NFL's image concerns can force interventions that expose more problems than they solve. Whether the conspiracy theories are true or not, the damage to the league's credibility is already done. The secret phone calls, emergency meetings, and forced compliance with league directives show how the NFL operates when its carefully crafted image is threatened. It's not about meritocracy or fair competition. It's about damage control, public relations, and protecting a business model built on the illusion of competitive integrity. For Shedeur Sanders, the real test isn't whether he was the victim of conspiracy or his own poor decisions. The real test is whether his talent is strong enough to overcome both legitimate concerns and illegitimate obstacles. Whether he can prove that all the drama, controversy, and conspiracy theories were just noise surrounding an elite quarterback who deserved better treatment from the start. The NFL's secret phone call saved Sanders' immediate career, but it also exposed a system where talent alone isn't enough, where family connections can hurt as much as they help, where perception often matters more than production, and where the league's most powerful executives will intervene when their carefully constructed image is threatened by the very problems they helped create. That's the real truth behind the Shedeur Sanders conspiracy. It's not just about one player or one draft. It's about how power operates in the shadows of America's most popular sport, and what happens when those shadows are dragged into the light.